cards for Janet Mitchell, Rosie Noonan, and Bill Deppy. And some of them might be a few days late because they should have gone out maybe last week or, you know. We have a get well card for Jim Regenweather, and we have a sympathy card for Ruth Wood, who lost her sister. So, announcements today. Pat Gent has an announcement for everybody. Oops, bright orange. She wants everybody to know that there's a Historical Society members only sale at the other building in the collector's corner, as she calls it. Everything all during the month of February will be 30% off, except for the books that we publish, and those can't be. But she said, come and take a look at our wide variety of items, including many other books, glass and kitchenware, pottery, linens, pictures, postcards, vintage tools, buttons, pins, badges, vintage cameras, jewelry, toys, and other collectible items too numerous to mention. And there are some really, really beautiful things in the gift shop on the fairgrounds in that museum. So don't forget, whole month of February for members only, 30% off. And she did add down here that if you don't have a membership and you would like to join, so you can shop at her sale, single memberships are $20 and family memberships are $30. And that's for the year. And the gift shop hours, of course, are the same as the hours for this building. Tuesday through Friday, 10 to 4, and Saturday and Sunday from noon until 4. So, don't forget about that wonderful sale. We have some one-of-a-kind things over there. I know this past weekend, there was and I don't even know what you would call it. It is a cast iron kind of sculpture, and it was very nautical looking, like maybe it would have been on a ship's mast or something like that. And gee, somebody gave us $200 for that the other day. So all of those things are donated to the museum for us to use, to sell, to keep the doors open, more or less. So anything you can find over there, that would be a big help to us. Don Wentworth has been telling me there's been exciting news for the Pioneer Cemetery Commission. There has been a new cemetery, Pioneer Cemetery, discovered. It's called the Field Family Cemetery. It is in section 25 over near Bellevue Township, section 25 I mentioned. The Field Family Cemetery. So that's pretty exciting. And so we've had one brown bag lunch, and this is the very end of January. That's amazing. So we had our first brown bag lunch on the 2nd and haven't been able to have one since. I can tell you, I don't know what brown bag lunch is going to be next week. It's going to be a surprise to all of us. On the 13th, Sue Mayberry has a program that is going to be so fun. Telephone operators, ladies who loved their jobs, and it's going to have a Valentine touch. And then on the 27th, we're going to have a really special program. Not that most of them aren't special, but a really special program from the Iowa Speakers Bureau. And you know how they have such wonderful speakers from the Iowa Speakers Bureau. Tom Mulligan, who is a historical impersonator type person, he's been here before, and he has done Grant Wood, thank you. Brain freeze. This time he's going to do Henry Wallace. And that is going to be, I think, a very, very wonderful program. So remember, we're doing it in conjunction with the Friends of the Caves and the Friends of Conservation. Really good deal for us because the Iowa Speakers Bureau funds most of that. So it's just neat to be able to do that. So we're expecting, hopefully, a lot of people to turn out for that. Friends of the Caves are bringing the desserts, and they make wonderful things. So don't forget to come. It's going to be a good program. So with that being said, we will have our program for today. And as people came in, I've been asking them, how many people have ever been to Hunter's Cave? I know one person in this room that's been to. Dennis, right? Dwayne, sorry. Okay, 2 people have been to Hunter's Cave. I never have. So I'm excited that they're there, and hopefully they will fill us in on the information that we don't know. I have to say, there are not a lot of pictures to show you about Hunter's Cave, but you just have to know that Jackson County is wonderful, and it's wonderful because of its rivers and its creeks and its springs. the beautiful limestone bluffs that we have, and because of those limestone bluffs, we have caves, and the caves are really amazing. Our Jackson County history books tell us that from the very earliest days, there are many, many caves that have been discovered in Jackson County. Some of them have, I think, been discovered and forgotten again. But there are many, many caves here. And so the impetus for today's program came about with this picture. And this picture appeared on social media, and it was labeled Jim at the opening of Hunter's Cave in Goodnose Pasture in 1920. That was the caption. Well, we know there's a little problem here, so hopefully with everybody here today we can kind of sort that out. We know that J. Goodnose Pasture was south of the YMCA, and Hunter's Cave is nowhere near there. So we feel that the article that went with this picture and this picture through time have kind of gotten intermixed. And so this is hopefully a way to kind of get that information sorted out again. So Don has given me this plat map picture of Dead Man's Bluff, and you have to correct me if I'm wrong here, Don. I believe that he's telling me, so this is the creek. Correct. This was all J. Goodnose property back in the day, right? East Summit Street, I imagine this is the YMCA, and we feel like right here is Dead Man's Bluff, right in this area. Okay, so that's where we believe the cave that you just saw, the picture that you just saw, where that cave is. Don remembers talking to Jim Frank, and most of you knew Jim Frank.
Jim Clark.
Huh?
Jim Clark.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought it was Jim Frank. Jim Clark?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It says Frank on the slide.
That's because that's what I thought it was.
Oh.
And I did the slide. My mistake, Jim Clark. Okay, so Don remembers talking to him, and he said that when he was 18 years old, thereabout, he worked for the owner of, well, probably J. Goodnow the third, maybe, who owned the property where the Y is now. And he would go down and look at the bluffs along, or the caves that were in the side of Dead Man's Bluff along here. And so he remembers seeing that. Perhaps he's the Jim that's referenced in the picture that we just saw. I guess we don't know that for sure. But that was in 1920. And as Don reminded me, it was at the top of Dead Man's Bluff that the old cemetery was before Mount Hope. That's where the cemetery was. So that kind of puts you in context of where that cave was.
Where was the opening? Where direction did that?
Do you know, Don, what direction the opening would have faced?
Face north.
It would have faced north. Okay. And I have a hard time visualizing
Connie?
that cave.
Where's Horseshoe Pond at compared to, where's Horseshoe Pond?
Right in the corner.
On the left corner?
Yep. You see it says horseshoe right
Oh,
there.
no, I can't see that.
Well, I'm standing right in front of it, and I can't see it. Where does it say that?
Okay. Now that,
Okay.
okay.
So I just wanted to kind of, because we don't have a lot of information, we're hoping to collect more information. Just wanted to say a little bit about this wonderful Caves book and the Friends of the Caves that are there. They sell this book at the Caves. The Historical Society, we published this little booklet, and we usually have it for sale. If it's $5 whole, if you ever have people coming to Maquoketa and you want to take your guests out to the Maquoketa Caves, it's a wonderful little book for you to have. It was written by Thomas Henry, and he tells us that most of the caves in Jackson County are called dissolution caves, and they are what most of the 17,000 caves, known caves in the United States are. And so he tells us that 400 to 500 million years ago, Iowa was set beneath a warm tropical sea. I know you've all heard that. And that's why we have limestone all around us. It was the sediment of the eroded and worn shells of all the billions and billions of little sea creatures that lived there over time. And there's a lot of fossils that remain that you can find in the limestone that show us what some of those creatures look like. A lot of them look like snails, clams, and like he says in his book, a lot of them look like something out of a science fiction movie. But he wrote this book in Belle Tubbs. We love Belle Tubbs. She had a lot to do with this wonderful little book. So he said first two things happen. You know, limestone has lots of fissures and lots of cracks, and so water would seep through the cracks, and the cracks would become wider and wider and wider, and eventually they would become passages. And then the next step would happen after these passages. Dissolution means dissolving, okay, so it would dissolve tunnels in this limestone, or tubes as he called them. And these at first had no decoration in them. And along the way, as the water table dropped, then those tubes were filled with air instead of water. And that's when the second stage started, and that was called deposition, for depositing. And any water dripping through the cavern, dripping down, would leave behind small deposits of calcite, which is the mineral that makes up limestone. And as these continued to build, they created what I know you've all seen in pictures, the fantastic speleothems, I think is how you say that. And that's what, to me, makes a cave look like a cave, right? The stalactites are the ones that come down from the ceiling. He says, Thomas Henry says, that stalactites grow only about 1 inch every 100 years. So it takes a long time for those to build up. And he also reminds us that caves are very fragile. And if treated badly, and these stalactites and stalagmites are touched, broken off, etc., this cave may not recover for 1,000 years or more, if at all. He made a map of the limestone layers in our area. Limestone, as you know, is deposited in layers. The Maquoketa Caves were formed in what's known as the Hopkinton Dolomite Stratum. And even though limestone, as you know, is easily dissolved even in just pure water, the process is really accelerated when it's acidic water, like acidic rain. And then when it passes through the organic materials in the soil, it makes these caves. So we're most familiar, you know, whenever anybody talks about caves around here, we think of, oops, I'm not very patient. Okay, we think about Burt's Cave. Now this is an old postcard from 1925, I believe. Burt's Cave in Jackson County, you know, that's what the Maquoketa Caves were called first. Then they were called Moorhead Caves for a long time, and then finally the Maquoketa Caves. And they were called Burt's Cave or Moorhead's Cave because the first, or probably not the first, but the long-time landowner was J.B. Burt Moorhead. So that's how the caves got those two names. And we have another postcard of Moorhead's Caves. And so these caves have been known for a very long time. But the thing that was so important, I think, to us is today these caves are able to be enjoyed by thousands and thousands of visitors each and every year. Because in 1933, they had the foresight, and because of the hard work of a few individuals, they had the foresight to designate these caves as an Iowa State Park. 1933, it became an Iowa State Park, and therefore open to the public and protected. I just wanted to show you a couple photos, old photos that we have, the Historical Society has. These two are from old postcards from the Maquoketa Caves. These happen to be from the Widemouth. One's from this is the Rainy Day Cave, I guess, and I think we have another one from the Widemouth Cave. But you have to remember, when these caves were first discovered, way back when, they had incredible, pure white stalactites and stalagmites. And they had things called flow stones, which I'm guessing is kind of what this is. And just all kinds of incredible, incredible formations. And we're told from our history books that the formations in the caves, our Maquoketa caves, would very easily rival anything to be found in Mammoth Cave, that's famous in Kentucky, in the Carlsbad Caverns that are in New Mexico. Well, today, our cave is an empty shell because it's been robbed of all of its speleophones. So, and this is the other one. But our caves had, at one time, when they were first discovered, had all of these beautiful, beautiful things. Okay, in the 1879 Jackson County history book, about so thick, first actual history book that we know of, printed for Jackson County, on page 350, there's the story from 1879 of Burt's Cave. And there was this description given of the caves by a Judge Thayer, and he was the owner of the Clinton Age newspaper in Clinton, Iowa in the 1870s. So he wrote this large article that ended up in the history book. He writes about a trip to the caves, and he's speaking about the dance hall cave, okay? Almost all of us have been to the dance hall cave, right, or the ballroom. Well, he says that they gathered specimens, which we cannot describe, save to say they are beautiful and we prize them. So they picked them and they took them home. Then 2 paragraphs later in this article, he says, the ceilings of these caves are hung with the most beautiful stalactites, and upon the floor, the corresponding stalagmites, the slow deposits of the centuries, as they rise up to meet their companions from above. Now, these are his words after he just told us that he took these. Unfortunately for the beauty of these caves, no effort has been made to preserve the natural ornamentation of the ceilings, and the glittering pendants have been broken off or knocked down by visitors until only a very small fraction of the very most uninteresting ones remain. So, we know that. There's deliberate harm, which is people who just thought they just needed one of these to take home, or a whole bunch, and then there's the unintentional. And just like we tell our visitors that come to the museum and we ask them not to touch the artifacts because their fingers have oils, even if they're very, very clean, they have oils, and they leave oils on our artifacts which cause deterioration and harm. In a cave, when you touch one of these things, the oils from your fingers stick to the formation. It will discolor it, but it will also halt its growth because the deposits of the calcite-ridden water will not stick to it. So instead of building, it just runs on away, and they do not grow anymore. Every time a formation is handled, it'll blacken, and it will never grow beyond its current size. So, in the 1879 history book of Jackson County, just a little further along on pages 252 and 3, there's an awesome article about Hunter's Cave. And that's what we're going to try to talk a little bit about today. But I have to tell you, there's not a lot of information. So the Cottonville Caves are sometimes, the Hunter's Caves are sometimes called the Cottonville Caves interchangeably. We know about them today, but most people have forgotten about them because I think today they're privately owned. And what landowner in today's Sue-happy society is going to allow thousands of people to come on their land and go through caves like this and be responsible? There's no landowner that would do this except maybe us at our southern border, I have to say. So these caves were discovered on the land of Joseph Hunter, and he was born in Pennsylvania in 1815. So that kind of sets the time frame for you. He came to Jackson County in 1849, which was 3 years after Iowa became a state, and he bought 240 acres of land near Cottonville. He was a county supervisor when, and back then, every township had a representative, a county supervisor. So he was a county supervisor at that time, and when this article appeared in the 1879 history book, he still owned the land. Well, I just wanted to show you this Costello picture. This depiction, this hangs at the other museum, and this is a depiction of the discovery of the Maquoketa Caves. And most of you will remember that it was discovered or rediscovered in 1837 or 1838 by David Scott and Josiah Bear. And they discovered it while they were deer hunting. As you can see, the deer running into the cave. Well, the deer ran into the cave, and when they tried to follow the deer, thinking they had them trapped in the cave, the deer were nowhere around because, of course, they knew the way through to an exit, and they got away. So, but to quote the history book, and the history book is pretty funny, so I'm going to read it to you. Hunter's Caves were discovered about 1857. This is Hunter's Cave. We're back to Hunter's Cave now. Hunter's Caves were discovered about 1857 due to a coon hunt. Maquoketa Caves, it was deer. Hunter's Cave, they were hunting coon. Some boys were engaged in this lively sport when his lordship, the coon, sought refuge at the entrance of a cavern and was pursued in his subterranean retreat by both dogs and men. At that time, the entrance was a passageway so low that it could be entered only by creeping on one's hands and knees. So that's how you first got into Hunter's Cave. Now we do have a drawing of Hunter's Cave, okay? And if you can see this, whoops, down here, it says it's from the Iowa Grotto in 1859, and it says that it was traced for what we have is a tracing that was done by Lee Templeton and presented to the Historical Society. So this is Hunter's Cave. As you can see, it's pretty extensive. Okay. So again, back to the history book. Okay. So outside of the cave, a ridge about 1.5 miles in length extends east from the entrance. This ridge is crossed near its western end by a sort of dry gully, and on the side of this little vale is an entrance to the larger cave. This entrance has of late years been excavated by blasting so that the cave can be entered by a stairway and in a perpendicular attitude. This cave contains 4 large rooms which have been explored. The first, after entering, is the largest of these. Perhaps it's 250 feet long, the ceiling in height from 6 to 20 feet. And this was unusual, I thought. At the center of this room is a pool of clear water, varying in depth according to the season, but no running water is found in the cave, as in Maquoketa Caves. Nor are there any fish to be discovered in the pools, as have been in other subterranean caverns. So, how does this water get there? And there's nothing in it. At the further end of this long room is a passageway of considerable length and difficult of exit, which opens up after a fall of about 8 feet into the third chamber of less dimension but equal curiosity. So as I looked at this, I couldn't quite decide what they were calling chambers, but this is what they were describing. Not far from the entrance, a passageway leads from the larger room around to the east of the entrance and into the grandest room of the cave as so far explored. The chamber is egg-shaped, though not so large in circumference, is near 50 feet in height. Its diameter will not vary much from 100 feet. Adjoining this is a small closet called the heart and liver room, because, I'm going to see, this is foggy for me to look at from up here. Can't remember where the heart and liver room is. Can you see? It does have it listed. Okay, so this is the heart and liver room. Yeah, right here. So you can see that it's, you enter and you have to wind your way back a long way before you get to the heart and liver room. It was called that because it contains a calcareous formation almost identical in shape and color, they said, as the human heart and liver. I mean, they just looked at it and, wow, the heart and the liver. No encouragement has ever been given to further explanation of these curiosities. This is 1879. and only during the past year has any effort been made to make them places of attraction or resort. These caverns are now becoming quite popular as a picnic ground, and a platform having been erected near the entrance for dancing. The floor of the large room of the cave is of soil, and it's frequently muddy. The floor of all the other chambers is rock. When first discovered, these rooms, as in those of Burt's Cave that we were talking about, were sealed by one dazzling array of milk-white stalactites, from whose points the lime water was constantly dripping. These glistened in the light of the torches like so many jewels, and presented a scene of wonderful beauty. Many of the relics were taken, amounted to positive vandalism, and that has robbed the rooms of much of these attractions. So already in 1979, these things were disappearing. Some of these stalactites were 2.5 to 3 inches in length, but frequently 24 inches long, while not more than maybe 1/2 inch thick at the base. So they were long, slender tubes. Others were hollow-like pipe stems, not much thicker, with water filtering down through the opening in the center. Most of those were translucent and almost transparent. Others were of a dull, muddy color. So, no fossils have ever been found in the cave of any importance. It has been explored by miners seeking minerals, but without startling results. Though no trouble has ever been experienced from gases in the caves, the high room has been punctured from the hill above for purposes of ventilation. The cave has been, during the present year, 1879, arranged for lighting, and lamps are distributed throughout the rooms so that all can be satisfactorily viewed. So right at the end of this time was when people were first allowed in there. Another and smaller cave has been discovered at the point in the hillside a little further west, and it has its own entrance, being entered by a perpendicular fissure in the rocks about 60 feet in length. So this is all from the 1879 history, and it mentioned, as you heard, that no encouragement had ever been given to further exploration of these curiosities, and only during this past year had it been put forth to make this a place, a resort, a place where people could actually come and see. Up until then, it was just there. Then Jackson County Sentinel published an article on July 7th, 1879. It was an extensive article about Hunter's Cave, and the reporter and others, I just thought this was so neat, the reporters and several others traveled 14 miles from Maquoketa on a very hot summer's day, stopping in the little burg of Andrew, where both man and brute enjoyed refreshing water from the town pump. They arrived at the residence of Mr. Hunter. They were going to his place. They got there about noon, and he piloted them on a drive through the woods to their destination, which was about 1/2 mile west of the Dubuque-Maquoketa Road. Their first indication of the caves was that air tube we just talked about, projecting out of the ground, penetrating the earth and rock for over 25 feet. So those are just some of the articles that let us know that this cave was there, and it was quite something. Like I say, we have very, very few pictures, and the ones we have are not dated. So you just kind of have to look at the people that are in the background, maybe look at their shoes, looks like blue jeans, and kind of figure out when you think it might be. But this, okay, say that again. Okay, so Larry's going to talk to us in just a little bit. He's been in there many times. He grew up there. He played there when he was a kid, but he did not take anything, right? No. Okay, so he is telling us that this is the iron gate that was over there, so nobody accidentally fall in there, or cattle or anything like that. And you had to move this to get into the cave. Okay. The entrance, it was just a large hole in the ground, stairs leading to the first chamber. Now remember, they're on this tour with Mr. Hunter. Mr. Hunter lit several lamps and in they went. They roamed around in there for nearly 2 hours, viewing with surprise and wonder the peculiar and odd geological formations. Some passages required that they crawl. Those were not entered by the ladies. But he described many large rooms, long narrow passages, and wondrous things. Their curiosity could not be stilled when Hunter announced the entrance to the liver and heart room. After a desperate trial of their varied locomotive abilities, they were successful in reaching this room, which had the appearance of a huge crevice, with standing room for about 15 people. And he reported that it was certainly worth the trouble, and that there was no description of this that could do it justice. Curious rocks protruded from the side of the wall in a great lump, resembling the heart and liver in color and shape. And then he added, talk about your stony hearts, here is an exemplar. The next sentence, though, again was heartbreaking because he said, after procuring a small cargo of specimens from the stalactite-bearing walls, we proceeded on our meandering course to the place of our entrance, where we were ushered into broad daylight, and that air quickly reminded us of a bake oven. Because, and remember, this is the 7th of July, and he said it was in stark contrast to the atmosphere of the subterranean cavern from which they had just made their exit. So it was nice and cool and in the caves, but when they came out into the hot July sunshine, they were just almost shocked. The article concluded by saying that Mr. Hunter and his partner, Mr. Polders, had constructed a large Bowery hall and several contemporary booths at which special occasions, large crowds and things could be entertained. And that on the 4th of July of 1879, remember that's the first year that they were making improvements, first year, 1,300 people entered this cave. The receipts from the day, and this is in quotes, footed up the snug little sum of $425. And 150 lamps were necessary to give the caves complete illustration. So, somebody called and asked me this morning, what kind of lamps were those? They must have been kerosene,
That or coal, maybe.
coal oil,
Miners' lamps.
coal oil miners' lamps. Okay, so
Yeah.
he outfitted it with 150 lamps. So on the 4th of July, these 1,300 people could go through. This underground curiosity was known to Mr. Hunter 18 years ago. So he lived on the land quite a while before it was discovered. And then it was 18 years before he started making improvements and letting people go in. But the first steps to open it to the public were not made until 1879. The surrounding of these caves, he keeps saying, is not as picturesque as those of the Maquoketa caves. I mean, part of the lure of the Maquoketa caves is the beautiful surroundings, right? The wonderful trees and the jagged, it's just so beautiful out there. Such was not the case around Hunter's Cave. So it must have been mostly a field.
You can see in the picture, I mean,
Okay.
it's just a rolling hill down and there's this hole there.
Okay.
I mean, there's no big bluffs or anything.
Okay, very different from Maquoketa Caves. But, they said, even though the outside of the Maquoketa Caves was spectacular compared to this, the interior of Hunter's Cave, he says, is much more interesting and will fully repay the visitor for the little time and expense incurred by a trip to them. So, that was just another account. We have another picture of the entrance to Hunter's Cave. This is a later date. There's no name on the picture, so I don't know who these brave people are. But this is looking down into the entrance.
Was that the entrance that they created then later?
It must have been.
That's actually where that wire gate is, or the iron gate. You go down in that and go, you almost have to get on your hands and knees to get down, and then it opens up into this.
So they've already gone through where the iron gate
Yeah,
is
that
and
would be
down
back
here.
about where I am compared to where the picture is. Then
Okay.
they come up to here, and what's dark in the background is the first big room, which is bigger than this. actually bigger than this whole building.
Wow.
I mean, it just spreads out all the way across.
Okay, does anybody, I have no idea what year this was, does anybody recognize these people
Well, on the left might be Steve Sims.
here?
Hey, camera or a light that you have?
It's their property.
It looks to me like she has a flash camera, is that what that might look right?
Oh,
That's a light.
Oh, a light,
No, that isn't him.
okay, it's a lantern.
probably 1940s or 50s, maybe?
These tennis shoes or?
Yeah, she's just got regular tennis shoes. So does this boy. Okay.
Recognize the cage.
The cave, okay. So, there's so few pictures of these. So I wish we knew more. We just know from all that's been in the papers, and I went back through all of the old papers, all of the things in the papers. It's easy to believe when you hear it told that this part of Iowa, this part of the Midwest, was just underground rivers everywhere that just, and then these made caves, and maybe at one time, all of these caves that we have around Jackson County were interconnected at one time. You know, makes sense that maybe they were when they were being formed, but I guess we don't really know that. I'm gonna ask Larry, he agreed. And Dwayne, right? If they have anything to add and you can ask them questions, as they have both been there, nobody else raised their hand. So,
I got as far as the mouth, and Dad said, don't you put in there, so I didn't.
okay. Good for you. Okay.
Did you get that far?
I did.
You got that. Okay, you got this far. Okay. Okay, so Larry, would you just, I just asked him to quick think of some neat stories and just his impression.
Some I can tell. So this was, I moved to the area in 1962, I believe. We lived on the Bellevue.
Maybe, I have the microphone too low. You can either raise it up or take it out of there.
There you go.
I lived,
Better? Okay,
is it on? Okay.
I think so.
So I lived over between Andrew and Bellevue. Then we moved to this farm. Vince Swagger owned the farm about a mile from where this cave is. And the cave belonged to the Steinus family, Tally Steinus, Bernie Steinus. I think it's still in their name.
Really?
And so Mike Steinus is also a county supervisor. He brought up that Hunter was a county supervisor, so supervisor still owns that cave. Or part of it, so. But we would go up there, well, I heard stories about it when I first moved there. I started the 6th grade at that time, and so we went out exploring. And it took a long time to find that, because it's just, I mean, it's an 80-acre timber, and it's just kind of out in the middle of it. Once you figure out how to get there, you can find it. But, so we head out there, and we head down into it, and one of the things, you had to pull the gate up with a chain, tie it off to a tree, and they had an old planter box, a green planter box, and you'd pull the lid off, and there's a notepad in there with pencil and stuff, and it had names of people that went in there, and where they're from. I mean, this was known all over the United States because there were names in there from all different states, and the date they went in and what time they went in, and then you'd have to put it on when you came out too, just as a safety feature. But we'd get a bunch of us together, and we'd go up there and we'd go through, and there's a, that's not. So there's one room that was called the Skull Room, and we managed to find it, and it takes, it's probably an hour trip to get there because, I mean, once you go through the big rooms, you've got all these little passages you crawl up and down through, and then you come into an area that's here and you look down. It's probably about 8-10 feet down to the bottom. It's called the Wheel Room. So it's, I would say, at least as long as this room, if not longer, and fairly high, maybe 30 foot high. And you're coming in kind of a third of the way up from the bottom. And as you get there, you look down, and it's 4 or 5 foot of water in it. But there's a passage out there. So you come in, and there's a ledge on this side, you work your way over, you get on this ledge, and you can go about a third of the way and then it comes out. The ledge is still there. The other side is about here. So the only way you can walk the rest of that ledge is to swing over and put your hands on the wall and do one of these numbers. So a few people could do that. A few others would panic and fall into the water. And then once you got on the other side, you went up, and there's another little passage in the small room. There's an old cow skull in there, and somebody had put a plaque in there. You know, you're a member of the skull room plan or whatever, and through the bruises and bumps, and then we'd come back out. So once half the people were wet, we start going through the wet clay in there, and you come out of there just covered. We did take stuff out of the cave, a lot of dirt.
A lot of dirt.
But we come out, and then we find a local pond, and we go swimming. And the water would just turn the clay color from all the dirt and stuff on our clothes. We'd do that on a Sunday afternoon and spend 2 or 3 hours going through it. I took our family reunion up there one time. I think there was 35 of us went in. We met another group of 20-some people in there. Yeah, I mean, all of us could go in there. And there's more room than what's in this room, in that first room. Yeah.
So are there any stalagmites left anywhere?
Not too much. I mean, some of the bigger ones that,
Couldn't be carried away.
yeah,
You use flashlights?
yes.
I mean, you had to, there's no, everything's dark as.
It's really dark in there.
Any bats or anything, or any living creatures you saw?
Once around the main entrance, you'd hear some.
Yeah.
So one of the things we would do just to scare people, once you went through that, back into that room, I mean, you could see the light from the outside, but once you went down into that room, and you walk around a little bit, and I had my cousin or somebody in there, and he says, okay, let's go back out. And he says, you couldn't find the entrance. You could not see it from there. He says, turn off your lights, you still can't see it. And he was almost in panic. And I said, no, I just walked over and right over here. But that's how dark it is in there. We had some great times. We'd go down there a lot of different times.
Did you get to the heart and liver? Did you ever see
I
anything
wasn't
that looked
familiar
like
with that,
that?
so I probably was there, but,
Didn't.
I mean, we explored all the different areas on different times. And this was 60s and early 70s. We were in there quite a bit. And I think later in the 70s, there was a group down there, and somebody lit off a smoke pump. And it was almost not good. I mean, they got everybody out, but there's some serious damage done. And after that, they locked it up for quite a while. I don't know if it's even open now, just because of, I mean, there's no air circulation in there at all. If you put smoke in there, it stays in there.
So questions for Larry?
Any questions?
Could you get to all of those different sections?
Okay, here it is. This is the skull room here.
Is that where you came in, or did you come into the cave?
So, I mean, this is an hour, and there's the entrance. So you're going from here all the way down back to here. And all of this is mostly on dragging on your belly and crawling. I don't think, I would not do it now. I mean, going to the main part's kind of nice. And then there's one, okay, the flat room, and that's as big as, about the size of this room, but it's only about this high. It's just, but it's a nice flat floor and a nice flat ceiling. It's just,
Larry, did you ever get confused on where you were in there?
when we first went in, we would take baling twine with us and strung it out. Yeah. Because we didn't have a map, or we had no idea what was going in there. And the more we learned, the more stories we found out. I don't know how we ever found that skull room.
Is that the only entrance? There's no other entrance?
That's the only
anywhere
one I know of.
else? Wow.
Yes.
Have there been any digs in there to look at if there's been past occupation? Any studies done that you're aware of?
Not that I know of. This is the first time I've seen a map of it. So, and this is what, 1959?
Does anybody know, like, acreage, how much acreage it covers?
I don't, there's a scale here, it's 40 feet, maybe? You can kind of get a rough idea. I would say at least an acre.
Does anyone still go down into the cave?
I don't know if it's, people have gone down there lately or not. I wish I would have talked to Mike Sinus ahead of time about this, because he, I mean, he's got probably more history on it than I do.
You ever fall in on the way to the skull room?
Hmm?
You fall in that water? And is it hard to get out? Like, are you,
I don't think I fell in going in, but coming back out. So you get some of the wet people on the slope, and then turn it into a water slide thing, yeah.
if you fell in, you had to climb your way back up to that?
Up and, yeah, so we'll get somebody to help pull you back up.
Was the water very deep in there?
About 4 or 5 foot.
So you could stand
It
up?
was cold. a little bit.
Wow.
It was clear when it started, but then we get clear in minutes. It was just a neat trek to go back to that and come up again. Right.
So can you easily see, like the newspapers back then reported, one time 1,300 people in there on the 4th of July, one time it was 2,000? Can you see?
In that cave, yes.
You can see, that big, you can visualize that many people being in there.
Yeah, it's a big, well, you said it's over 100 feet by 150 feet. That's a really huge barn. Yes.
You know what township and what section that's in?
Richland number 1. Our country school was right up the road from it. Richland Township. So do you know where that, okay, the next 4 corners south of Cottonville.
That would be the,
Where you turn to go,
level B.
it turns into a level B, yes.
Okay, yeah, right there.
So you go straight west at that intersection, comes down, it makes a hard 90, goes up the hill, makes another hard 90. Where it makes that first 90, you can park there, walk down the trail into the timber, and then work your way up to the west. Steinus's.
As you get past Sheehan, right?
Hmm?
You look at past Sheehan's.
No, you're going the wrong way. Going
Oh,
west.
The other way.
Yeah,
Okay.
west from the intersection.
But the entrance is harder to see though.
It is.
Just for
yeah.
clarification, that iron gate is laying about 2 to 3 foot below the surface because it kind of goes in. So it's not a cave like you walk in the wall, it's a cave like you find in the floor.
You find that, and you kind of walk down and
Yeah.
get down to the edge, and then
Yeah.
pull the gate up, and then you kind of find down another 4 or 5 feet to get to a flat area, and then off. And it's an opening about at least 12 foot diameter. And then there's one shot that goes out that way to that entrance. There's another small one underneath it that you can crawl through, come back around into the. Yeah, so you're coming in this one for the main one, and then this one comes around that flat room. So that flat room is only maybe 4 foot high, but you can come through there.
So Larry Bonney was talking about a vent for air. Did you ever see
I
that?
never knew of that.
I-
Somebody did say something, there was a well casing
Okay,
that
I
came
was
through, and I bet that's what that was.
Yeah.
I never did find that.
Did you ever hear of anybody getting lost in there, or were they rescue parties, or? No?
There's been people down that get turned around, yeah.
Yeah, I
You
can
finally
imagine.
figure out where, I mean, if you start looking for tracks, like where you're walking and stuff, you can see the trail going back to the main
Okay.
thing, so if you use your head and don't panic, you can get out. Yes?
Getting lost makes you wonder, will a compass work inside of a cave like that?
Good question. I would think yes, but I'm not sure.
Will you repeat his question? 'Cause
I
maybe-
asked
Would a
if a
compass
compass would
work
work in
in
a
a
place
cave?
like that.
Your parents knew you were in there the first time? Or did you,
I don't know, maybe.
repeatedly, they probably started.
Oh, they said Kanako swimming in the pond, so that was after this, so probably not.
So Don has a comment.
Yes.
So, in answer to your question, Bonnie, there were people that did get in there and had to be rescued because you can go from the mouth all the way to Bellevue underground. And there are different,
The mouth of this cave,
yes,
all the way to Bellevue
all the way to
underground.
Bellevue. So there, people would go in and there's different, you know, in order to get to Bellevue, you had to know which way to turn.
So where would that be on here? It's not on there.
What, the mouth?
No, how do you get Bellevue from here?
I don't know, I've never been in there,
No.
but you can take Bonnie later.
Bring your camera.
But
Okay.
there are accounts in the historical record of what I just said.
Really?
And people would have, and then people like Larry that knew how to get around in there would have to, you know, kind of like look at trail, you know, look at the trail and see if they could figure out and then bring them back out.
Was there an exit in Bellevue? No.
They're supposed to be, I
So they
don't
could
know,
actually get out in Bellevue?
according to what was written in the historical record, yeah.
Wow.
Okay, I had not heard that. That's interesting.
Okay, any more questions?
Any hints of Native Americans around that area at one time?
Not to my knowledge, there was a hanging tree close by. Going back, that's more our history, but I think that was it.
Which hanging tree?
Yeah, they probably had quite a few.
No, which hanging tree?
I don't know, I don't remember the name of it anymore.
Oh, okay.
I knew it was somewhere between, in that area.
So is it the kind, having been in there, is it the kind of place that someday somebody might develop it and open it up and, or there's just nothing left in there to see and?
It's a neat spot. I don't know if it would draw that much tourism. I mean, people that are in the caves, yes.
Okay,
I could see it.
spelunkers.
Yeah, spelunkers would relish going in there because it's a large, you know, completely unaltered cave.
But you'd have to go a long way on private property, which would not be a good idea probably.
Oh, it's all on the same property.
Okay, so that whole cave system is in one piece of property.
Yeah, on 80-acre timber. And I'm almost sure, I talked to Bernie Stein, which is Mike's brother. I think they still own that timber part. They sold the farm.
Okay.
Larry?
Yes.
So, I'm understanding at one point in time, and I don't know when, but I thought the University of Iowa brought a team to explore that cave. Is
Sure.
that
I
correct?
think that's been done quite a few times. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
And that's where these maps come from.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
And I remember that as a kid, these vans full of Iowa State and Iowa, you
Okay.
know, they'd say, we're here to visit Hunter's Cave, do you have any idea where it is? We point them in the direction, you know?
I mean, there's another way from the Malone Farm straight west and down over the hill, and that's probably a little shorter way, less timber to get there. I'm not even sure who owns that farm now. The other one is on that 190-degree corner that you can go in. Not my only experience with caves. I was hired in 1981 to rebuild the Mapogata Caves after a 12-inch rain flooded the whole area out. There was like 40 foot of water at the main entrance, and it all forced through there, took out all the sidewalk, and the water in there is actually about 12 foot deep where you walk through now. All the bottom loose rocks and mud were taken out. So they gave me a crew of convicts out of Anamosa to rebuild this thing. It took us almost a year to replace. So when the water came through, it washed all the stuff out of the main part. In the middle entrance, where it opened up, the water would shoot up there, and it piled all them rocks and stuff up in that middle entrance area. And where the water can flow through there now, that was, I want to say 12, 14 foot deep in rock. So we started out with wheelbarrows and planks and hauled it in and dumped it in the water. Most days you might make 2 foot of solid ground in a day's time. You just dump it in the rock, you know, just go down into the abyss. We tie ropes on the ends of the wheelbarrows on the leg in case you went up and it stuck and it fell down in the stuff. We were fishing it out for a while. It was quite the experience.
I guess it was. So what other caves?
So as we were working on this cave, And like you said, they've taken all this stuff out, except for one cave. It's still there. And there's probably only a handful of us that know where that is. And I won't go there. I mean, we found it. It's on the south side. There's a spring comes out of the bluff. That's the entrance. And what we were doing, we were trying to lower the level in the cave to do the work. And there's some rubble and stuff there, and we pulled that out and lowered the water down, and we could feel some air movement in there. Yeah, didn't do a lot for that, but it gave us a way to get in there. And then come into a small room, another little passage where you had to, you couldn't go like that, you had to get on your side, and half your face is in water. And you slide up through into this really cool cave with all the stalactites, all of that stuff is still in there.
It's still in there.
Yes. I talked to the ranger and I said, there's a couple pieces that are laying on the floor, and he said, bring a couple out. And I think one was about 5-6 inches in diameter. And we brought a couple, they're up in the museum part or somewhere out there they have them. And then other than that, we just left it the way it was. But there's a little history nobody knows about.
That's for sure. You heard it all here.
But they were saying there was another room somewhere, there was a deep drop off,
Okay.
and they could throw rocks down and it would just go down. And every now and then I'd sneak a couple guys out and just check up in there, and they'd be digging around, and we were trying to find that other thing while we were working on stuff. Kind of brought some excitement to it. I mean, when you're out there shoveling rocks for 8 hours a day, that makes it a long day.
That's right.
But,
So, another question. Don't go away. The Historical Society has a letter that was written to, wait, I gotta find it. Lawrence, he's in our Hall of Fame, Rich, the minister from,
Nelson?
yes, Reverend Nelson, okay. So there was a guy who used to be around here by the name of Phil Lewis, thank you, Phil Lewis, and he was writing to Reverend Nelson, and he wanted him to go on a cave exploring junket. We remember Reverend Nelson was the big conservation guy, real outdoorsman, fished all the time and everything. So he was trying to get him to go hunt for this cave. And he had served in the church in Andrew, and that was their connection. And so this happened around Andrew, and the story was told of this cave that had been found there. And in the cave, as you went into the cave and back, it's near Andrew. I had a picture, maybe I have a picture of it. Back in the cave, when you got back in there, if you looked up high, and it would have to be high enough, he said, for someone to do this, there was a pictograph, what do they call them? Pictograph on the wall, up high, of an Indian chief on a horse. And he heard this story, and he wanted Reverend Nelson to go and find this. And if he found it, he wanted him to contact Iowa State Conservation, somebody who would preserve this, and just not let the public in there to destroy it until they had it all preserved and everything. So they were hunting for this cave, and Don and I found it on a map over near Andrew where we thought it was. Do you remember that? And does anybody, Dennis, have you heard of that?
Dwayne.
No, Dennis. I'm talking to Dennis this time.
Oh, okay.
I get my Dwaynes and my Dennises mixed up though, for sure. Okay, so, but supposedly this beautiful cave near Andrew, and again, there must be so many caves around here, but this one has a pictograph in it. So
when was that written, between Nelson and Reverend?
the letter was written in 1960. And we had when we first got it, we had a whole brown bag lunch about it. We called it the Mystery Cave near Andrew. And in 1960, this letter was written to Reverend Lawrence Nelson. And they were trying to find this cave. So I just wonder if anybody had ever heard about this. And he said it was in a stand of oak trees. And he thought that was really neat because of the oak trees, that if they could find it, it would make a beautiful, you know, a beautiful park and a beautiful tourist place. And that would be a great thing for Andrew. I just wondered if anybody had heard of that cave. Anybody know about any other caves? Because there must be a lot of them.
There's a small one at Prairie Creek.
Okay, the Indian Shelter Cave?
Yeah.
Okay.
About, early 2000s, we used to live in Bettendorf, and we had a cabin up at Leisure Lake.
Oh.
And first year we were there was over the winter. I remember our kids were, I don't know how, 10 or so,
Uh-huh.
and walked across the lake, and there's a lot of bluffs over there. And my daughter found this little hole. She went in there, and I kept waiting and waiting for her to come out. And finally, after about an hour, she did.
I'd be a little worried.
And she said, well, there's just a lot of passages in here. But she was crawling on her belly. And I think my son went in for a little while, and then he just came right back out. But, so there must be some up
Right.
around Leisure
So
Lake.
Don, when we went to Leisure Lake and met with those people, didn't they talk about a cave over there?
Yeah.
So,
There's,
It's probably the
I
only
don't know if you know Leisure Lake, there's, they have the gates. It would have been on gate one side, which is, I think, more of a private property area.
On the south side of the lake.
Yeah, on the south side of the
Yeah.
lake. It would have been,
I've been over there a few times, but cutting wood and something, not, I didn't know
yeah,
about
be on the
caves.
southwest
Yeah,
part of it. So,
it's pretty rough over there.
wow.
yeah,
Any
yeah.
more thoughts, questions? So I have a proposal to make. I think we should get RTA buses like we used to do, right? Larry has connections, and he can give us a tour of Hunter's Cave. How many people would be willing to crawl? I just get in there.
You could actually get in there without getting down on the hands and knees. I mean, if you stoop down, you can walk. I mean, it's just a short, like maybe from here to there to get to that.
Surely.
When you said crawl, it reminded me, my daughter has 2 caves on her farm, but you cannot walk into them. You only see the opening. I have never been in them because I'm beyond getting down and crawling on,
You're not volunteering for this trip.
But her, I don't know that it has any connection to that. But it always struck me funny that here's a farm with 2 caves on it, and it's, her son has gone in them. They don't go real far, but it's different. She's out on 92nd Street.
Okay. Dennis, do you think, nope. Do you think that there was a river system all through this area connected, and
I couldn't say yes or no. on
they don't
that.
teach you anything about that?
No.
Okay.
There's one up by Monticello, south of Monticello. He said if you, the water, there's somewhere where you can take a bottle and put a note in it or something and throw it in there and it'll go down. And it takes 3 or 4 days for it to go through the passageway and then it'll come back down where the Camp Courageous is, I think, in that area.
Yeah.
There's an underwater passage where
They kind of
the
follow.
creek kind of hides for several miles there.
Wow.
And I'm not sure where it starts and ends, but I've heard them talk about that.
That would be, maybe that'll be our next trip, after Larry gets done taking us through Hunter's thing. Thank you, Ray. Any other questions? I was just gonna show you a couple more pictures that I brought. Okay, that's the Levinson farm went in. That was just more of a shelter where we know that Native Americans lived, and this is where Paul Sagers found a lot of his artifacts and that sort of thing. And this is one evidently above Crabtown. But I did want to show you this. So this is something that we have at the other museum. It's in a wooden case. And actually tried to get Kevin Brown to help me move that over here this weekend, so you could see those beautiful stalactites, or stalagmites, I'm not sure which they are. But we decided the case was just a little too rickety, and it would really not be a very smart thing to move them, because I probably break them. And so we left them over there, but do go over and look at them sometime. And these came out of Crystal Lake Cave. Yes, over by Dubuque. I bet a lot of you have been to that, right? And I just wanted to tell you, they were taken from there in the 1920s or the 1930s, but they were removed so that they could enlarge the entrance to the cave when they first started taking people through there. So they were taken out for a purpose, not just stolen. And there was a man by the name of Henry Gerlach from Bellevue, and he, I know, worked at the Bellevue factory. They said he was a cabinet maker, and he specialized in cedar chests. But then in 1966, the Faust family donated this to the museum, and so it's a wonderful thing to have over there. But we didn't steal it from a cave. Just wanted to be sure you knew that.
How tall are those?
So this case is about this high off the floor, but just kind of rickety. So that's kind of a short one. But they're very interesting and very pretty. And in researching online, I could see how in a lot of these cave systems, and I know some of you've been to Mammoth Cave and Carlsbad Caverns and those things, because they're very skilled at where they put the lights, to light those caves, they can just make them wonderful. But I wish we had all our wonder left in Jackson County. So we just have to preserve what we still have. So I want to thank Don for helping me figure out the first thing, and Larry, thank you very much.
I've got one
And Dwayne?
thing for you.
Okay,
You struggle with stalactites,
yes, please.
stalactites hang tight to the ceiling.
Okay,
Stalagmites are on the ground.
a good way to remember that, stalactites from the ceiling. Thank you for that, I did struggle. Trying to figure out how am I going to, thank you, I'll try to remember that. Okay, any other comments before we go? Thank you very much.
Yeah.